Welcome to Small Spark Theory. This podcast is designed as a collection of thoughts, ideas, and practical tips on using marginal gains to help your agency new business endeavours. Small Spark Theory is hosted and created by Lucy Mann, founder of Gunpowder Consulting.
Welcome back to Small Spark Theory. I'm delighted to have Catherine Allison here with me today. Catherine is what I can only describe as a personal skills ninja.
Oh, I love that.
I
Thank
think you
you.
are. I think you
I'm
are.
going to describe myself as that from now on.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So we were introduced a couple of years ago, I think, and since then you've set up Master the Art.
I have.
Which is a consultancy that helps people with their personal skills. So presenting in pitches, networking, building a greater presence in Gravitas.
All of those things. Exactly. It is. Effectively, Master the Art is a training consultancy that helps agencies in particular, and that's agencies from any discipline, win more business by helping their staff present and communicate better.
It would be really useful if you could just tell us a little bit about, because I know that you've got an unusual collection of skills that brought you that brought me here to and setting up Master the Art. So yes, give us a little bit of the background.
I'll give you a brief background on me and my experience, and I promise it won't take too long. I come from an integrated agency background, and I worked for 20 years. Oh my goodness, that makes me feel so old. In client services roles, and then moving into a business development role. And I ended up as head of marketing for a creative agency. But 8 of those 20 years were also spent training and working as an actress. And I used to freelance at agencies during the day and pop off to auditions as and when I could, and freelancing obviously to try and make some money so that I could live. But it was at this time that I discovered that all these skills that I was learning from the acting world were so beneficial to me in my day-to-day agency life. And I found that I was constantly drawing on those skills when presenting to clients, running a status meeting, communicating with senior people within the agency. And it was really these 2 sets of skills, so the client services and the business development and the acting, that led me to set up Master the Art, because I truly believe that the way that we present ourselves in business can make all the difference in terms of how we are perceived as individuals and also how an agency is perceived overall. And often, for me, the presenting part is bolted on at the end, rushed through. And actually it's that bit that is the bit that can provide that tipping point in terms of someone wanting to work with you as an agency.
Absolutely. And I can fully vouch for Catherine's ninja skills because, full disclosure, I was asked very kindly by the Design Business Association to do a breakfast talk, and had what I can only describe as the world's worst panic attack as I started to speak in front of a room full of 60 people, which was probably is a crippling experience, and anybody listening that's had a similar experience will know exactly how that feels. But it does mean that next time you have to be in a room either presenting to people, even if it's only 5 people, it's quite difficult to get that out of your mind. And Catherine brilliantly gave me loads of fantastic preparation tips to make me feel more at ease, and touch wood, it hasn't happened again. And I've had lots of lovely feedback from other presentations that I've done. So there's a testimonial for you.
Wow, thank you.
But I can imagine for lots of our listeners, nerves, however that may manifest itself, whether that's just not being able to quite get your words out, or whether it's all the way through to a full-blown panic attack, that can be quite debilitating, and it can play out in your mind. Tell us, what's been your most nerve-wracking experience?
Oh goodness. Well, I would say there have been many. Number one, I still find public speaking and presenting terrifying. However, I have learnt to use that fear in the right way, so you can get over the nerves, I promise you. But I mean, I've got a personal story and I've got, I suppose, a more professional one. The personal one is that I always get wheeled in to do readings at friends' weddings.
Right.
And it absolutely petrifies me because you've got to get it right for them because it's their personal day. And yet from a professional perspective, you want to get it right in terms of the delivery as well. So it's just got so many different things that are important for that particular moment. But I would say from a professional perspective, and this goes back to my days as a more junior member of staff in agencies, where you'd be in the back of a cab on the way to a big pitch, which you'd been brought into at the last minute, and someone throws some slides at you and they go, right, you're presenting these. And you look at your watch and you think, well, I've never seen these. And you're asking me to present this in
the back of a
5
taxi.
minutes time in front of senior clients and my boss. And I'm pretty sure that there are lots of people listening that can identify with that situation. It happens all the time. And there is nothing more terrifying than being that member of agency staff, particularly if you're more junior and you haven't done lots of presentations like that. Nothing more terrifying. And I think it's really important that we allow time for preparation for every single member of staff that's going to be in that pitch room or that presentation room.
I can imagine then that if you're working with agencies on developing these kind of skills and developing techniques to get to be more prepared, a lot of the times some of it's about actually their personal skills, but a lot of it's about preparation and planning.
Absolutely.
I would imagine you must see quite a lot of change, some real results, which must be quite rewarding.
It is. It's hugely rewarding. And I wish I had a story that said, there was one particular client who had never presented before and then delivered something outstanding to a room full of 500 people. I don't have that story yet. Exactly. I don't have that yet. But it's actually the smaller transformations that are the things that I find most rewarding when working with clients. And often it's a confidence issue and it's about helping people with certain physical tips and tricks that are going to give them the confidence to present with more authority and gravitas. Or it might simply be that people don't know how to get their message across in a really structured way. And sort of giving them a structure to work with so that then they can feel confident in terms of their message delivery, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense.
So it's really more the smaller sort of transformations and achievements that people make on a day-to-day basis. And then they come back and say, you know what, that worked, Catherine. I now feel that I can deal with X client or present to X number of people in a room with far more confidence. So it's those small things that really are rewarding for me.
What does make a really good presenter or public speaker? Because, you know, I can talk to you and you've had all of the acting training and you still find it difficult, but I've seen you speak at a seminar and you're really good at it. And there are lots of people that we know that we've seen amazing TED Talks and what have you. You think, God, there are people that can just hold a room and it seems effortless. What makes a really good presenter?
Well, it's not effortless. It may be in the end, but it takes practice.
Right.
And everyone can speak with more presence and more gravitas. It can be learned.
Okay.
So that's first thing to say. But for me, a good presenter is someone that who can present with real influence and authority and yet still have this natural warmth running through absolutely everything they do. So it's really authentic. They're able to be entirely themselves and yet still have the power to command the room and command trust and respect from others.
Right.
And so it's important that it's not about trying to be someone else.
Yeah.
And it immediately shows if someone is not being authentic. And actually often you see people stand up to present and they may have been having a very normal, natural conversation with someone and they're engaging, they're dynamic. And then as soon as they stand up to present, they start using long words and complicated sentences. And you think, well, what on earth has just happened to you? You've lost all that authenticity and real passion.
Yes.
And it's something that so often people feel they have to be someone else when they're standing up there and they don't. So for me, it's about using simple language, short sentences, being comfortable with a pause. Don't be afraid of silence. All of us, I'm sure, are guilty of using filler words, ums, ahs, likes. That's a very popular one at the moment. I'm like so busy. It's like I'm like all over the. Get rid of the like, get rid of the filler. But be comfortable with a pause. They're never as long as you think they are, I promise.
What then would be your top 3 tips?
Ooh, top 3 tips. I've got more than 3. I could probably go on forever, so I'll try to keep it succinct. But for me, it's about being polished, poised, and prepared.
They're all P's. I love that.
They're all P's.
Brilliant.
The P's come in everywhere, don't they?
They do.
That sounds odd. But if you think about someone you know that's got really strong presence, they never enter into a room looking harried or flustered or anxious or sweating or whatever it might be, papers flying all over the place. They come across very polished and poised. And so I would always advise that whether you're going in to present to a room full of people or whether you're purely going to run a status meeting with your client, before you enter the room, take a deep breath, stand tall, give yourself a moment to breathe in and out, and then walk into the room with confidence and poise, and just allowing yourself those few seconds even just to take a deep breath and then walk in.
Okay.
Even if inside you're panicking,
right.
Just doing that can make all the difference in terms of how people will perceive you in those first few seconds of meeting you in particular.
So I guess you need probably to readjust your planning a little bit to make sure that you're not actually running in
absolutely
late, and so that you have got a little bit of space just to give yourself a moment before you walk in, because if the trains are cancelled again and there's a tube strike again, then the chances are that you are going to be running in a bit harried and papers flying
and it's
everywhere.
never the right way to start a meeting or a presentation.
Yeah.
And then also allowing yourself enough time for preparation. So if it's a presentation that you're doing, make sure that you really know your content, but make sure that you know your content in a way that you can talk naturally about it and that you're not stuck to a script or stuck to the PowerPoint slides, which I'm pretty sure most people listening will be guilty of. I know I've been guilty of it, reading off the PowerPoint deck.
Yeah.
So allow yourself enough time to rehearse what you're saying, but in a very natural way.
So would you recommend having an actual rehearsal where you're running through the presentation out loud?
Absolutely.
Rather than just reading through it in your head?
Definitely, because it feels so very different when you're saying something out loud. And it's only by actually saying it out loud that you realise the bits that you perhaps aren't quite certain of yet, or where you haven't quite got your thinking clear. And I would always recommend that you rehearse the point changes or where you hand over to someone else.
Right. Those transitions.
Transitions. That was exactly the word I was looking for. Transitions. Because we often forget to do that. And then there's this clunky moment where you're like, oh, now I'm transitioning to another part of the presentation. Or now I'm going to hand over to Lucy and she's going to talk to you about, and it just sounds really unnatural and clunky and wooden. So really rehearse those transitions and that can help you feel more confident. But definitely say it out loud.
Okay. And it doesn't matter whether you're doing that with somebody else in the room or whether you're just saying it out loud to yourself.
Make sure it's someone that can give feedback in the right way, because the last thing you want someone to do is kill people's confidence.
Yeah.
But they may be able to say, well, actually, when you did that, it came across in this way. You might do better to do X, Y, Z. Or as simple as them saying, there's a glaring hole, you haven't answered that part of the brief, which, you know...
or the idea isn't coming across strongly enough.
Exactly that. Polished, poised and prepared was sort of number one top tip, I would say. But number 2 is about your body language. So mind your body language and be aware of what you do. We're often in a bit of a flap inside, and that comes out in the way that we use our hands or constantly nodding our head or whatever it might be. Or you may have a little nervous tick that you're not aware of. Someone I know constantly scratches his head all the time. when he's presenting. It's actually my husband, don't tell him. But he's not aware that he's doing it. And it's almost like a little tick that he's not quite aware of. So if you're someone that feels that they use their hands too much or they're not quite sure what to do with their hands, then try putting your middle finger and your thumb together and just gently touch them as if you're doing that yoga pose.
Mudra, I think, something like that.
I think that's what it's called. And that just makes you feel that your hands are being used in some way and stops you feeling the need to flap them around.
Wave them
around, which immediately detracts from your presence and your gravitas when you're presenting. So be really aware of your body language and have very open body language and stand or sit tall because that makes a real difference. If you sit here now and you raise your body up and pull your stomach in and open your shoulders, you automatically feel more powerful.
I feel a bit louder
and in
now.
Control. Exactly, but it makes a real difference. So just doing these small things can help you feel more confident as you walk into a presentation or as you begin.
I went to a presentation with a comedian whose name I forget now, and she was talking about how you can be more confident, and she was taking it back to when we were on the savannah.
I know who this was. Yes. It was Deborah Francis White.
That's right, yes. She was doing a talk at a dinner, and she was saying you're either a lion or a gazelle. And if you behave like a gazelle, you're going to get eaten. If you behave, and typically, as she was describing it, there'll be certain types of men that will walk into a room and they're automatically a lion, and they literally hands on hips, doing a bit of a kind of Superman pose, and will walk into a room thinking, right, where's the most important person in the room because they're going to want to meet me. And then there are other people that sort of slink into the room.
And they're the gazelles.
Over, and they're the gazelles.
Eat me.
Exactly.
No, she is fabulous. Deborah Francis White, and actually she was someone I was going to talk about later on in this session in terms of someone who is very inspiring, and she's done some fabulous TED Talks.
Yes, and she does it with humour as well, which makes it so much more...
Such good humour. And that comes back to my point about a good presenter and public speaker is someone who's got that authority and gravitas and yet has sort of passion and humour and wit running through everything that they do.
Yes.
So she'd be a really good example, and I'd highly recommend that people look her up.
Yes, exactly. She's great. Okay, any more tips there?
And the final tip, in fact, there's two more. So your voice. Be really aware of your voice. Speak up and speak clearly and loudly. And if you do that, you're so much more likely to get your voice heard. As I said before, avoid using fluffy language. Use short sentences and short words. It can make all the difference. The last thing you want people to be doing is sort of listening to you waffling on with the longest of sentences, and then you've lost your track and you think, oh, what am I trying to say? But I'm going to keep talking because
I might just come back round again and remember my point.
And then before you know it, you've promised something to the client that you can't deliver. They're going, oh goodness, what's going on? So yes, short sentences, simple language, speak clearly, firmly and loudly, and you'll be far more likely to get your voice heard.
Great.
And then the final one, and actually I think this for me is one of the most important things, and it's something that people overlook so often, and this is about listening.
Ah, yes.
And when we're in an environment where we're presenting to others, we so often feel that we just have to talk at people. I need to tell you some things. You need to know how good I am and how good our agency is, so I'm just going to keep talking at you. I'm sure if any clients are listening, they will have sat in meetings with agencies where they have done just that and they've been talked at for an hour.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest pieces of advice that I give to individuals and to agencies overall is about listening. Get the client talking. The more you listen, the more you learn. And even though it feels counterintuitive, if you get the client talking, they feel that you as an agency get them.
Yeah.
Because they have spoken a lot and you have asked intelligent questions. Yeah. And I have been in situations, I know this works, I've been in situations where an agency may have said 5 sentences but they've asked questions, got the client talking, and the client afterwards has gone, wow,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
They really get us.
Yeah.
And even though this particular agency may not have had any experience within that client's sector, they go, whoa, wow, we really want to work with them.
Yeah.
It feels counterintuitive, but it works. So take the focus off yourself and really listen to what other people are saying.
There's a really lovely example of that with Richard Williams from Williams Murray Ham. He and I used to work together, and we went to a couple of those speed dating client agency events. And he has real gravitas, and he's very, very much less is more. And he's got these bright blue, sparkly eyes. And he would literally walk into a room, sit down, lean back in the chair and say, so what keeps you awake at night? And these brand managers would literally just be telling him everything. And he would just walk away with a couple of briefs and Bob's your uncle.
Exactly. It
now,
works.
That's extreme. That takes a lot of practice and a lot of years. And that takes a seasoned professional to be able to do that. But if you can try and channel that approach, then I guess that really helps.
Absolutely. And there's a quote actually from Maya Angelou, who is the African-American writer and civil rights activist. And she said, people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel.
Oh, brilliant.
So I think it's a lovely quote to think back to when you're about to head into a presentation or a first meeting environment, because it can really help you focus on the right thing. Think about how you want that client to feel and how you're going to make them feel.
And it actually takes the pressure off of it, doesn't it?
It absolutely
takes the pressure off
does.
yourself and your own performance if you're focusing on them rather than yourself.
It makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference. And particularly when you're entering into a chemistry meeting with a client or a first meeting, and the extreme example is the speed pitching days. So often people get hung up about the content and what they're going to say. And actually just coming across with energy, enthusiasm and listening is all you need to do. A lot of the time.
As long as you've got the facts to back you up when they ask you questions. But the listening. So what piece of advice have you been given that's really stuck with you?
Oh, well, there is one particular piece of advice, and I really wish that I had come up with this myself.
Okay.
But this is a piece of advice from a magician and business trainer, and someone who is a master in the art of persuasion, and he's called Lee Warren. Fabulous guy. And he urges people to think about ham pie.
Ham pie.
Exactly. Sounds odd, doesn't it? But it's an acronym.
Okay, brilliant.
So I am in this context using an acronym. Forgive me, but it's a brilliant one.
Okay.
And ham pie stands for Hearts and Minds, Pictures, Interest and Enthusiasm. What do I mean? Or what does Lee Warren mean when he talks about ham pie? So, hearts. All decisions that we make are made emotionally. And then we justify them rationally. So it's really important when you're thinking about doing a presentation that the first thing you do is engage with your audience emotionally. Get into their world, really try to find out what it is that makes them tick. But make sure that you're engaging with them emotionally. Because then, once you've won them emotionally, you can provide the reasons why what you're presenting, what you're proposing, is a fabulous idea. So hearts and minds. Engage emotionally first, and then back it up with the facts and figures to get them to justify it rationally.
Okay.
To put that into an agency context, so often we start agency presentations with facts and figures or slides and slides of strategy before getting to the idea or the proposition or whatever it might be. And while those facts and figures, oh yes, we've been going for 20 years and we have offices in Hong Kong and Dubai and London and we have 20 staff, it may tick some boxes, but it is not going to engage emotionally with the audience at
hygiene factors.
all. And people have almost got into the habit of just churning through that information. And it can make so much more of a difference in terms of the impact that you make in a presentation if you try to turn things around and engage with a client emotionally right from the offset. And there are many different ways that you can do that. And so the pie of ham pie, as I said, stands for pictures, interest, enthusiasm.
Okay.
Pictures meaning that we tell ourselves stories about our life using pictures and stories and metaphors. And we can be so much more persuasive if we use pictures, stories and metaphors rather than falling back on facts and figures. So, for example, you might say, this coffee that we're drinking is 97 degrees. Great, it's a fact. But that's not nearly as persuasive as if you say, ooh, that coffee is steaming. You're really going to burn your tongue and the roof of your mouth. Because you've used much more of a story around it to make it more persuasive. I mean, that's a very simple example, but you get my point.
That makes sense.
And then the I of ham pie is interest. And again, this point should be obvious, but it is so often overlooked. But how is what you are going to say of interest to the other person? And this comes back to my point of listening. Relevance. And putting the focus on the other person. But you have to see things from other people's point of view if you're going to connect with them and be persuasive. So you really need to make sure that your proposition, your idea, your service, your product is really going to be of interest to your audience. And then the E of ham pie is enthusiasm. And this is the one I feel most passionately about. And that is be enthusiastic and be genuinely enthusiastic about what it is you're talking about. Because emotionally, people know right away if you're not being genuinely enthusiastic. And subconsciously, they'll think, well, if they're not enthusiastic about it, well, why should I be? So that enthusiasm has really got to come through. And when people have that genuine enthusiasm and passion, it's almost magical, I believe. And it's such a powerful thing. So that is the best piece of advice that I've ever been given. And now I constantly tell people about it because I think it's brilliant. Ham pie.
Passing it on.
Passing it on.
Passing
Absolutely.
It brilliant. Are there any other inspiring figures, or is there a TED Talk that's a particular favourite of yours, or is there a book? There are so many books out there.
There are so many books out there, and I think of all the books that are about presenting and presence and gravitas, there is one in particular that I think is fabulous, and it's written by a lady called Caroline Goyder, and it's called Gravitas, and I think the subline is how to present or how to communicate with confidence, influence and authority.
Sounds great.
And it is great. And what's great about this book is that it is practical. So it's got very specific action points that you can put into practice in your day-to-day working life and indeed beyond the scope of work to help you communicate with more confidence and to try to get this presence and gravitas nailed, because everyone can get to that point, definitely. So I'd highly recommend that book.
Fantastic. As you know, this podcast series is really all around marginal gains and how we can make the really small improvements. And funnily enough, even though this feels like a really big subject, quite often these softer personal skills are the things that really get overlooked and can, as you said at the beginning, they can really undermine an agency's performance. And I've been in situations before where I've been invited into an agency and to try and audit their new business performance where they don't seem to be doing so well. And quite often it's because the opportunities have been there to go and meet some really interested businesses, potential clients, but the wrong people have been sent to go and do those meetings. And when I say the wrong people, they've been the people who haven't been given the support and the skills that they need to be, and they don't understand the structure of a good initial creds meeting or whatever you want to call it, and they just haven't been given the support and the skills to be able to do that. And that's a very expensive exercise if you're particularly if you're paying for somebody to generate opportunities for you. The time out of the office, the preparation and the salesperson's time in generating that opportunity, that's quite an expensive exercise. And I've done this calculation before, and depending whether you've got a new business person internally or whether you've got an external new business lead generation agency, the likelihood is that each initial meeting that you have with a potential client could be costing you around £1,000 or £1,500 a pop.
And it's such a shame when agencies have worked hard on a response to a pitch, and it may be that their response is brilliant, and yet it falls flat in the presentation,
in the delivery,
because the wrong person, or not necessarily the wrong person, but as you say, someone who hasn't had the support or been able to practice how to deliver that idea in the right way, means that they don't win the business, and that is such a shame.
Where can people contact you, Catherine?
They can contact me by going to my website, which is mastertheart.co.uk. Look me up on LinkedIn as well, Catherine Allison.
And we'll be giving all those details out on the blog, so anyone can get in touch if they need your help. Thanks very much, Catherine. It's been great.
Thank you. I've loved it.
As in previous podcasts, we've got a little competition giveaway. We've got a copy of Catherine's recommended book, Gravitas, Communicate with Confidence, Influence and Authority by Catherine Goyder, which we're going to be giving away. So if you join in the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag #SmallSparkTheory, we will pick a lucky tweeter and send through a copy of that book. Tune in next time when I'll be talking to agency growth expert Felix Velarde.
You have been listening to Small Spark Theory, a podcast by Gunpowder Consulting. Music is provided by Duke Deck, available via dukedeck.com. Small Spark Theory is hosted by Lucy Mann. The editor is Isabel Jarvis, and the podcast is produced by Rosanna Miles at makemypodcast.space. Visit gunpowderconsulting.com for more information and visit our blog there to download further podcasts. Join the conversation on Twitter at Gunpowder Tweets #SmallSparkTheory. And if you like what you hear, head to iTunes and give us a star or 5. Thanks for listening.